Okay, this is the second video in the Australian Grand Prix review series. Now, we're still on the formation lap. And on that formation lap, we've got a driver that has crashed out in those conditions. So, I'll quickly play this for a second.
Oh, we got somebody off already.
We have already one of the racing bulls.
Okay, so, issues. Now, most of my videos relate to problems with commentary or problems with the regulations being misapplied. This is slightly different, where I talk about facts and how things need to be in terms of rules and regulations in many of my videos. In this, I'm going to express opinion. Okay, so I'm making a clear distinction between fact and opinion, and it's unusual for me to voice my opinions relating to things, and I am open to hear what people's opinions are relating to this. However, what we saw at the Australian Grand Prix were several drivers crash out of that race, of which several of those were new to the sport. We've also got the most experienced driver in Fernando Alonso crashing out of that race. We've got an experienced driver in Carlos Sainz crashing out of the race. So it's not just exclusive to the rookies for crashing out. However, this is the problem, or this is a problem in Formula One. A problem in Formula One is young, inexperienced drivers being given an opportunity in the sport. It is a shock to the system, and it takes some getting used to handling a car of that power with those handling characteristics. Number one, in any condition, it takes some getting used to. Number two, it's even harder in conditions such as we witnessed in Australia. So, what my feelings are on this are that I don't feel that the pathway to Formula One prepares drivers well enough for the demands of Formula One. I believe that there are several drivers fast-tracked into the sport that aren't prepared enough. This is supposed to be the pinnacle of motor racing. If it's the pinnacle of motor racing, what we should be seeing is the 20 best drivers in the world competing in that series. And it doesn't seem that that's the case. It doesn't seem to me that we are witnessing the 20 best drivers in that sport. Now, what we've seen for years is this notion of you can buy a seat in Formula One if Daddy is a billionaire. Used to be a millionaire. These days, Daddy has to be a billionaire in order to buy a seat in Formula One. Daddy can buy a team, and you can get a seat in Formula One. Nikita Mazepin got to go in Formula One, didn't he? Latifi got to go in Formula One, having wealthy parents. Lance Stroll's dad's bought a team. I mean, to be fair, Lance Stroll puts in the occasional decent performance. Okay, are those drivers necessarily in the top 20 in the world, or were they at the time that they were competing in Formula One? And I don't believe the answer is yes. Now, obviously, we have these feeder formulas, but for the most part, they are, as far as I'm aware, and I don't really follow the feeder formulas that much, but they're populated by younger drivers, young up-and-coming drivers. Back years ago, there were drivers that would have served an apprenticeship by driving in World Endurance Championship. I can't remember what year it was, but prior to Michael Schumacher competing in Formula One, I saw Michael Schumacher driving a Mercedes, whether it was a C9 or the other one that they were competing at the time, driving in a 4-hour World Endurance event at Silverstone. Okay, Michael Schumacher and Carl Benlinger were teamed up in a Silver Arrows Mercedes, and they were competing against Jaguar. The race was won by Teo Fabi. Brundle came third in the second Jaguar. I don't know who their teammates were. there was the likes of, in that series at the time, you've got the likes of Herbert was competing. Various other drivers were kind of cutting their teeth, serving their apprenticeship, driving other formulas of high-powered cars, getting a lot of driving experience in a lot of conditions. But we seem to get young lads now given an opportunity in Formula One, and they've not had a great deal of experience. So I feel, firstly, point one is I don't feel that the pathway into Formula One is robust enough. I don't feel that it is preparing the drivers well enough. And number two, once a driver is given that opportunity, I don't feel that opportunity, I don't feel they're being given a good chance. And the reason is the amount of driving, the amount of testing that they can actually do to familiarise themselves with that car is not enough. In any sport, what sports limit the amount of time you can spend practicing that sport in the environment that you're going to be competing in that sport? Because in the Formula One car, you've got the testing session at the start of the season, but essentially the amount that you can drive that Formula One car is extremely limited. Now, anybody that's done any form of coaching course will have heard this notion of, in order to achieve mastery of any discipline, you've got to put the time in, and they quote the time 10,000 hours. Okay, you've got to build up, you've got to do something for around 10,000 hours, and that time will vary depending on the aptitude of individuals. But you've got to do something for around about 10,000 hours in order to achieve mastery of it. And some people will do 10,000 hours and still have limited ability. It's the way it goes. But as a general rule of thumb, okay, you need to put the hours in to master your craft. All right. Now, no doubt these lads will have been driving from an early age. They'd have been into karting straight away, and then they'd have been competing through the various different formulas. However, it is not the same as driving a Formula One car. That's a new alien experience to them, and getting used to that, a car of that size, a car of that power, the grip levels, the downforce levels, driving in different conditions, on different surfaces, on different tracks, different camber, different, even whether it's clockwise or anti-clockwise, the forces involved in terms of the strain on the body, all of these things take time to adapt to. And we've got rookie drivers thrown in there, only given a limited amount of time to actually try out the Formula One car, and then you're in at the deep end in the so-called best form of racing in the world. You are now regarded as one of the 20 best drivers in the world because you've been given your opportunity in this, but you've not given them a fair crack at it because you're saying, but you're only allowed to practice for a little bit beforehand. In any other sport, what would that be? Football players, they're not just allowed, you're only allowed to train for 3 days before the start of the season, and that's it. And when the season starts, outside of games, you're not allowed to kick a football. No, you're only allowed to train for 1 hour on a Wednesday, and that's it. Other than that, you're not allowed to kick a football. Or you're only allowed to kick a size 3 football. Doesn't happen, does it? You know, if you're an elite cyclist, one of the best cyclists in the world, competing in the Tour de France, for example, they don't prevent you from practicing on the equipment that you compete in. Oh, you're not allowed to do that. If you're doing any practice, you have to do it on a BMX or the gym bike. You're not giving these competitors the best chance of honing their skills, of developing the skills, developing their ability to give them the best chance in this sport. All right? You're just not. But we're being sold it as being the pinnacle. These drivers could be so much better if they're given the opportunity to practice, if they're given the opportunity to develop their skill, become more familiar with what it is they're doing. It would make the sport safer. If those drivers have greater mastery of the machine that they're competing in, that makes their driving, well, it makes them able to handle the car better, and that should lead to things being safer. They should know their limitations better. Again, that should increase safety. Should, providing they go about wheel-to-wheel combat in the correct manner. So, again, we are sold something, and the limitations, the regulations that they impose on the teams and the drivers for the amount of time that these teams and drivers are allowed to spend actually driving the car and developing the car actually inhibits the development of those drivers and the development of those cars. I understand the notion of a budget cap. I get all that. But this is supposed to be a sport. It's supposed to be the pinnacle of sport in this type of sport. And if you put them restrictions on it, then you are capping how good these competitors can be, how good some of these teams can be, and they're on a hiding to nothing, particularly these young lads. Now, Isaac Hadjar there, you could see he was distraught. He was embarrassed. He's on a global stage, and he has just crashed his car before the race has even begun. He's distraught. Now, there will be people out there that will delight in that. They'll delight in his failure. They'll be jealous of the fact that he's being given a chance. He's on a massive salary as a young kid, and they'll like to see people fail. But I feel that you need to give people a fair crack of it if they're going to be put up in front of the world. Sadly, we live in a world now whereby, well, it's probably always been like this. People will sneer at failure. They will like to see people fail. And what we have is this notion of social media, whereby Hadjar knows that we'll get some wank boy make memes out of what he's done. Okay? That's what he'll become. Somebody who's crashed his car before the first race. So the laugh along meme, look everybody, haha, look at this guy's shit. You know, the wank boy that has no ability himself, but is happy to try and just take somebody else down. So a young competitor, new to the sport, is up against that dynamic. But what is the sport doing to protect him from that? Because the sport knows that dynamic is going on. You know, FIA has on its webpage that it's against online abuse. Sky Sports F1 has Hate Won't Win, or had that, along with the BBC. We've all known about this dynamic for years, for decades. What's being done about it? Nothing. They like it. They actually like that type of meme. Why? Because it causes engagement in the sport, engagement in the show, and you get to see these brands and these businesses. You get to see their brand, and even if it's not in a good light because the car's crashed, you're looking at that, you think, oh, that's a brand, isn't it? That's a brand. When you think of you think of a credit card, what do you think of? And that's all they care about is money. But there's people here. And we're paying our money to watch a sport because they want us to pay our money to watch a sport. And the sport that we're watching is limited because they've imposed limitations on it, limitations on the teams, limitations on the competitors that aren't giving those teams and competitors the best chance of producing the best outcomes. So the observation from this point, and as I say, it's not a fact. There might be people with better suggestions. Okay, they might highlight some reasons that I've not considered here. But ultimately, I feel it's a failing of the sport, a failing of the FIA. Firstly, not having a pathway into F1 that is robust enough to have ensured that the drivers that are arriving in Formula One have honed their skills over time, served their apprenticeship effectively. Okay, again, it's part of the problems in the world at the moment. We've got this entitlement in terms of youth, whereby youth thinks it's entitled to be the CEO of a company at 17. You know, this is the world that we live in. But they've got to serve their apprenticeship, but that needs to be set up in the right manner. And then once they've honed their skills, once they've developed the experience, because again, that was another thing I heard of. Oh, the youth comes along with its experience. I heard Sky Sports talk about that. I think it was Crofty or one of these presenters on Sky Sports ahead of the season, talking about the mix between old and new in Formula One. Oh, the youth comes along with its experience. And you think, well, what experience is that? We've all been young lads, those of us that are male, and those of us that have developed a bit of maturity can look back at when we were that age. We did think we were invincible. Yeah, we thought we were bulletproof back then. We thought that we could do 200 miles an hour and crash and get out of the car unscathed. But with time, you realise life isn't like that. Okay? You realise things can go wrong. And you realise that you need to upskill yourself, or you need to drive within your own limits. But you firstly need to find your limits to be able to drive within them. And you don't really want to be finding what those limits are when you're thrown in at the deep end in the sport of Formula One. Yes, you need to develop that over time, but again, that can be developed in practice rather than on the global stage of a Grand Prix race. You're not protecting these drivers from the abuse that they're going to get from being exposed to that kind of environment, unprepared, and then doing what Hadjar did here. He wasn't the only one. Let me just cut to the race result, and we'll just go through the other drivers. So Hadjar did not finish, didn't even start. Jack Doohan, okay, another rookie, did not finish, out on the first lap. Carlos Sainz also out on the first lap. So again, it's not just the rookies that were crashing out in those conditions. Okay, you wouldn't have expected Sainz to drop it. He complained about the power just not being as he expected to kick in, and it just spun the back end out. Fernando Alonso, the most experienced driver on the grid. You wouldn't have expected him to lose it in the manner he did, but he did. All right. Bortoleto, another new guy. So you've got Hadjar, Doohan, and Bortoleto. Three of the new lads not finishing. Bortoleto span, I believe, and crashed. Liam Lawson span, didn't finish. Behrman, he's had a few, well, he's back down at the 14th place finishes. He has had a few Grand Prix under his belt, but he's still relatively new to it. And the rest of them, Ocon is experienced, Tsunoda's experienced now, Gasly's experienced, Hamilton's experienced, Piastri's experienced now, Leclerc is, Hulkenberg is, Stroll is, Albon is, Kimi Antonelli. Essentially the only rookie that got through that race unscathed. Out of Hadjar, Doohan, Bortoleto, Lawson, relatively new to it, Behrman kind of relatively new to it. So again, these are generalities. It's not a hard and fast statement saying all these rookie drivers are rubbish, all of these rookie drivers are unprepared, none of them can cope. What I'm saying is things could be better to help all of them, and the pathway needs to be more robust so that those skills are developed by the time that they get to Formula One. They might need to serve a few more years of their apprenticeship before being given an opportunity. And actually, when they get the opportunity within Formula One itself, there needs to be the ability for them to spend time driving the machine that they're going to be competing in. to hone their skills in the machinery that they're expected to compete in. So that will do on this video. We'll start the race, and well, let's see what we do as I go through this footage of the Australian Grand Prix. I'm going to pick out the talking points, many of which are the lies that were being fed in commentary, or it's going to be the rules and regulations of the sport where we're being lied to about them, or they're not being followed. But this is, like I say, the second one, and this is something that I feel the sport of Formula One needs to improve on. Oh, and just to add to this, actually, let me just go back to that clip so that you can see what was caused by Hadjar spinning here was a 10-minute delay to the start of that race. So this was a formation lap. Because he span, the race was delayed for 10 minutes. The teams came back onto the grid and put the tyre warmers on. 10 minutes wasted. Now, when a car goes into the pits and into its pit box and the teams retire the car, what you generally get is you get one guy on a jack at the front of the car, one guy on a jack at the back of the car. They jack it up, and between two guys, they wheel that car into the garage. What we have at Formula One, when it deals with cars that are like this, is we have to wait for a crane to come out on track. Now, there are times where the damage is such that you're not going to be able to move that car with just two hand jacks. Okay, it might be in a location, for example, in gravel. This, you might not be able to get to the back of it. You might not be able to move it, okay? So it might require the crane. But the number of times I've seen a situation where there's a car similar to this, and you think, those jacks that they use in the pits, they could literally get two marshals out there, jack the thing up, and have that wheeled off the track within 30 seconds. So at every marshalling point, and it wouldn't be that expensive to do this, at every marshalling point, if they had two of those jacks like they have in the pit garages, it might be possible to actually get racing underway a lot quicker than what they actually do. Again, this is a sweeping statement. It doesn't apply to every situation. But for example, in this situation, what may have been possible, and I don't know the extent of the damage, so it may not, but just consider it as being a possibility. A car is crashed. You have to determine whether or not that car is going to get going again, whether it's going to limp back round to the pits. At the point in time where you realise it's not, you've got to make a decision because you've got to get that car removed. So, cars crashed. Race control immediately need to identify that and slow every car down to a delta. Okay, slow everybody down while we realise what's going on, because what we don't want is those cars arriving back to the grid and then waiting there, overheating, we're told, tyres going cold, we're told, pressures decreasing, we're told, brakes getting cold, we're told, all of them dynamics taking place. So there's an incident, slow down to a delta. What can we do? Can we get two guys out on there with Jack? Is he retiring the car, or is he going to get going again? Right, if he's going to get going, he's got to make it round to the pits, and he'll either have to start from the pit lane or whatever. Okay, but that doesn't prevent them from starting the race. Doesn't prevent them starting the race. If he's retiring the car, if he can't get the car going, if it's too damaged to take the car back to the pits, can two guys get out there with jacks? Okay, if it's not in gear, you might just get the front end jacked up. A marshal pull it forward, get a jack under the back end. Depends whether something's going to sink into the grass. I don't know what's possible. It might not be possible, but at some races, in some circumstances, it might be. What I'm saying is they should have that provision. They should have that provision, because they should have the provision to quickly deal with these events. And there's times where things look like they can be quickly dealt with safely, and they're not. Because, again, had they got two hand jacks there, had they slowed the drivers down, waited till all that snake of cars had passed. 2 guys out there with jacks, being able to move it, and it's very, very close to a gap in the track, in the barriers. Let me see if I can find that. Okay, that's a different view of it then. So you can see here, it's very close. You can see the crane there. All right, but 2 marshals running out there, one jacking that up, one jacking that up. They'd wheel it round here and through there, and within 30 seconds that could be removed. By the time that those cars have got round to the front of the grid, we're good to go. We don't need a 10-minute delay. We don't need to waste another lap, which should be a Grand Prix lap, on performing a formation lap. Because that's what happens. They fuel the cars up to do a formation lap and the number of laps for the Grand Prix, plus leaving a minimum of a litre in the back. If you do a formation lap and somebody crashes out like this, then you've got to do another formation lap, but that takes a lap off the Grand Prix distance. So, because you've only got a limited amount of fuel in there. So it prevents that. And us, the spectators, get to see the full Grand Prix. So it's simple things like this that could produce a better product. And it's not difficult to think of things like that. There's many things like this that the sport just... I want to know a reason why they don't do that. Okay, and there might be some valid reasons, so let's hear them. Okay, often I don't invite opinions because certainly from the strap-on fanboy, the opinions aren't very good. let's be clear. They don't really have a basic understanding of the fundamentals of what's actually going on. So asking them what they think is a futile exercise. But there might be things that I'm not considering here as to why my proposals are fatally flawed. Okay? And like I say, because we're on grass here, it might not work. Although there's types of jacks that can be used where they're less likely to sink in. For example, if you've got wider wheels on there. But 2 guys, jack front, jack back. You could even have them powered, so they're like slightly motorised. Power assisted jacks, like you've got electric scooters these days. Jack the car up, pull it away, through that barrier, we're good to go. Okay, we're good to go. We don't need to waste 10 minutes. We don't need to waste a lap on another formation lap. And that could get the races underway better. That could lead to interventions in races being a lot less. Certain things could be dealt with virtual safety car rather than having to intervene, put out a full safety car to deal with a car that is like this. Certainly in the opening stages of a race, if it's this sort of intervention, you might be able to get a car like that removed within 30 seconds, and it would, under virtual safety car, once the last car has gone by that scene, there might be a window of 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes, before the lead car comes back round. And that would be long enough to remove this and get racing underway and deal with the incident under virtual safety car, rather than have to get that yellow crane out there, all strapped up, lifted up, reversed back off there. 2 guys, hand jacks, power assisted hand jacks, hand trolleys, get the thing wheeled out the way. Let's crack on. Right. So, let me know what you think in the comments section. That'll do on this one. There'll be a lot more to come because there were various safety car incidents, various safety car procedures, so much lies from Brundle and Crofty, and many, many more talking points. Various talking points regarding team strategy, various talking points regarding us. What did we expect with it being a race in the wet? Were we expecting a masterclass again? What did we get? Anyway, loads more to come. Thank you for your time.